Most of the time, the many movies and TV shows of the MCU practically invite fan speculation. And while those fans have gotten a whole lot right over the years, they've been wide off the mark just as often. These are the biggest MCU predictions that fans got completely wrong. In the original Infinity Gauntlet comic book storyline, Thanos and his quest to obtain the 6 Infinity Stones was spurred by his affection for Lady Death, the actual personification of, well, you know. So when it came time to adapt this arc into the 3rd and 4th Avengers movies, Marvel fans eagerly speculated on how the character of Lady Death might factor into the story. One popular prediction was that Cate Blanchett's character of Hela from Thor Ragnarok would end up playing the role in Infinity War. Most of this speculation was informed by the scarcity of other antagonistic women in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, though. Basically, if you wanted an imposing and malicious feminine figure that Thanos could fall for, it was basically Hela or nobody. This concept only became further popularized after an interview with Mark Ruffalo in which the actor indicated that Blanchett was going to feature in the 2 Avengers sequels. Of course, Blanchett never appeared in either of these movies, let alone as a movie version of Lady Death. In fact, this Hallmark supporting character from the comics hasn't appeared in the MCU at all, with the films opting to give Thanos a new motivation for enacting his campaign of galaxy-wide genocide. And sure, taking this route had its advantages for the films themselves, but it did sadly mean dashing away the hopes of Marvel fans who wanted to see Blanchett's Hela and Thanos sharing some romantic screen time. For a very long time, there was rampant speculation among Marvel fans over where the Soul Stone would show up in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The first 5 of the stones had debuted in 4 different titles in the franchise, so it stood to reason that another of the movies was going to introduce the 6th at some point before Infinity War hit theaters. Among the many theories fans concocted, for example, was the suggestion that the Soul Stone could have been in Wakanda, or that it'd show up in one of the Netflix shows. One of the most popular theories of all argued that Heimdall held the key to this particularly powerful stone. The idea was that Heimdall himself was a keeper of the Soul Stone, because it was the same color as his eyes. The theory was bolstered by a line in the Dark World, in which Heimdall refers to his all-seeing power.
From here I could see 9 realms and 10 trillion souls.
So yeah, it was a bit of a stretch, but since Heimdall was set to reappear in Thor Ragnarok before Infinity War, it's not like his deeper involvement in the Infinity Stones arc was totally out of the question. In the end, however, all this speculation was for naught. Not only did Heimdall not have the final Infinity Stone, but Marvel actually chose to keep the Soul Stone totally out of sight until Infinity War hit theaters. Doctor Strange was a largely self-contained entry in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Save for a few name drops on that mid-credits encounter between Doctor Strange and Thor, the movie was more concerned with setting up the magical world of Stephen Strange than shoehorning in an appearance from, say, the Hulk. However, many fans predicted that one line from Doctor Strange was supposed to set up a Marvel superhero to be. The line appears right before Strange's fateful car crash, just as he's trying to decide which new patient he should take on.
How about a 22-year-old female with an electronic implant in her brain to control schizophrenia struck by lightning?
That does sound interesting.
That woman, these fans argued, was Carol Danvers. Speculation over this theory only went into overdrive when Doctor Strange director Scott Derrickson gave a pretty ambiguous response to it. When asked by Entertainment Weekly if the line was referencing Carol Danvers, Derrickson replied, "Remember that Brittany Murphy movie where she goes, 'I'll never tell'?" Several fans interpreted this cryptic response as confirmation that Captain Marvel's origin story had been hinted at in Doctor Strange. Of course, this would turn out to be impossible, given that Captain Marvel takes place in the 1990s, decades before Derrickson's movie. That alone, as well as the fact that nothing about Captain Marvel involved getting struck by lightning, makes the whole thing seem ridiculous. But that's the benefit of hindsight for you. In the first Iron Man movie, Jarvis advises Tony Stark that he should work on trying to keep the Iron Man suit from freezing when entering the upper parts of Earth's atmosphere, just in case he's planning on going to space anytime soon. While Stark briefly traveled to the cosmos in the climax of the Avengers, there was much speculation that Iron Man 3 would be the movie that saw the titular superhero spending a considerable more amount of time in outer space. This theory intersected with fan speculation that Stark would have some kind of encounter with the Guardians of the Galaxy in Iron Man 3, as a way of setting up their own impending solo movie. It didn't exactly hurt when sites like Screen Crush reported in January 2013 that the toy line for Iron Man 3 would include new Iron Man armor designed for space travel. Of course, in reality, this turned out to be yet another instance of superhero movie toys featuring a costume made exclusively for Walmart's shelves. Tony Stark stayed firmly on planet Earth in Iron Man 3, and it wouldn't be until Infinity War that the character would finally meet the Guardians of the Galaxy. Before the release of the Avengers, there was constant speculation about which villain Earth's mightiest heroes would fight in their big screen debut. After all, you don't bring together a gaggle of superheroes for just any occasion. There has to be someone truly special for them to square off against. This fact helped inspire persistent rumblings that the Skrulls would serve as the otherworldly foes for the likes of Tony, Cap, and Thor, with Screen Rant adding more fuel to the fire by reporting a year before the movie's release that the Skrulls would be its primary adversaries. The Skrulls made sense as antagonists for the Avengers, thanks to their ubiquity in the comics and the fact that the movie had long been officially confirmed to feature cosmic threats. Who better to fill that role? Of course, in the end, this theory turned out to be entirely wrong. In the Avengers, the lesser-known Chitauri race are the aliens the team goes up against. Funnily enough, this is a rare piece of fan speculation that wasn't entirely off base with the reality of the movies, as the Chitauri did initially serve as a counterpart to the Skrulls in the Ultimate Marvel comic book line. In the comics, the demon known as Mephisto has a rich history indeed, one that's closely connected to many of the characters who showed up in WandaVision. Given his proximity to the show's protagonist, it's probably not much of a surprise that many fans spread all kinds of theories about how Mephisto might factor into the fantastically weird Disney Plus series. In the end, however, Mephisto had no presence of any kind in WandaVision, and the show's head writer, Jack Schaefer, said this was a conscious choice. She explained to Deadline, "We didn't think this series needed a big bad. I mean, the big bad is grief, you know, and that's the story that we were telling. And then we got a bonus baddie in the form of Agatha Harkness, who ended up facilitating Wanda's therapy. I think we feel pretty good about that." On top of that, Schaefer said she didn't even know about Mephisto's existence until she was done working on the series. She explained, "There was never any conscious intention on my part to create any Mephisto red herrings, because I didn't know who Mephisto was until I started doing press." Avengers Age of Ultron was widely promoted as being a significantly darker movie compared to the original Avengers. With all the talk of a somber tone, it was only a matter of time before online fan theories turned to whether or not one of the Avengers would bite the dust before the movie's end. Before its release, a fan favorite pick for the doomed Avengers was none other than the God of Thunder. This was a concept that gained a lot of steam among certain MCU fans, with some people today still believing Thor's demise at Ultron's hands would have fit snugly into the film's narrative. But in the actual Age of Ultron movie, Thor was given far less important things to do. His infamous cave sequence became a constant source of ridicule, while the sort of Avenger who was killed ended up being the newbie superhero Quicksilver.
You didn't see that coming.
Phil Coulson's death in the Avengers was one of the most moving moments in the entire movie, and it solidified the character's popularity among MCU fans. With Coulson resurrected for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., talk inevitably turned to how this agent could re-enter the movie side of the franchise. This speculation was especially prominent in the lead-up to Age of Ultron. However, the movie's writer and director Joss Whedon felt quite strongly that Coulson should remain dead when it came to the MCU's big-screen adventures. In an interview around the time of the movie's release, he said, "As far as I'm concerned, in this movie, Coulson's dead. It's a different world now, and you have to run with that." Fans may have been convinced Age of Ultron was the perfect time to bring back Coulson, but at that time in Marvel history, Whedon's word was pretty much law. It was always known that Infinity War would bring almost all of the MCU's silver screen superheroes together for the very first time. What was far less certain was if the franchise's television superheroes would also be invited to the party. Specifically, lots of fans found themselves wondering whether or not the Netflix Defenders superheroes could show up, and if so, how would they factor into the movie's story? Earlier comments from Marvel Studios brass had indicated that such characters could show up in any of the movies, including the long-awaited crossovers in Infinity War and Endgame. In the end, these heroes never made it into either movie. But that doesn't mean the filmmakers behind the film weren't speculating about their involvement just as much as the fans. Speaking to Inverse on this subject, writer Stephen McFeely said, "We talk about that all the time. In a movie this big, we certainly had the conversation, should we put Luke Cage in this? Here we are in New York, that kind of stuff." As you could probably tell, it would be just a glorified cameo at this point. He and co-writer Christopher Marcus also brought up the difficulty of expecting moviegoers to simultaneously keep tabs on theatrical movies and the Netflix shows. Thus, the Defenders, despite so much fan speculation, remain small-screen heroes, for now. At the end of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Nebula departs her new comrades to pursue her abusive adoptive father, Thanos. The somberness of her farewell and the emphasis on her departure seemed to many Marvel fans like a potential setup to the character's death in Infinity War or Endgame. The concept of Nebula biting the dust in these Avengers movies, further fueled by her personal connection to the Mad Titan, proved so popular that she was chosen by Business Insider as one of the characters most likely to die in Infinity War. However, all the speculation proved to be totally off the mark. Though a version of Nebula did die in Endgame, the original Nebula survived both films and even became one of the lead characters in the latter. Right now, she is expected to appear in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 in 2023, and even beyond that movie, the sky's the limit for Nebula. Check out one of our newest videos right here, plus even more Looper videos about your favorite movies are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.